I had spent the whole morning preparing the dining room. It was my 71st birthday, and I wanted the house to feel warm and festive. I had baked the cake myself, chocolate just like my late husband always preferred, and placed the good plates on the long table we only used for holidays. I lit the scented candles I'd been saving since Christmas. I knew they didn't care much for the effort, but I wanted to believe for once that they might appreciate it. By 3 p.m., my son Daniel arrived with his wife Vanessa and their 2 daughters. Vanessa walked in first, holding a store-bought cake in a plastic container. She didn't say hello. She just looked around like she was evaluating something. "Oh," she muttered. "You went with burgundy for the tablecloth. Again. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing." Daniel smiled politely at me and kissed my cheek. "Hey, Mom." I opened my arms to hug the girls, but only Lily came forward. The older one, Haley, barely looked up from her phone. I didn't take it personally anymore. I tried to keep the mood light. "I made my famous lasagna and chocolate cake for dessert. Your dad's favorite." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Right, of course you did." They walked into the living room, like they owned the place. I followed, carrying Lily's jacket, but paused when I heard Vanessa speak under her breath. She just doesn't know when to let go. I didn't say anything. Not then. I kept smiling. That's what I'd learned to do in the past few years. Smile, nod, and stay quiet. Other family members trickled in. My cousin Martha, my neighbor Ruth, my niece Jenna. People who remembered my birthday because I reminded them. The house filled with noise and smells, and for a moment, I allowed myself to feel proud. Then Vanessa did what she always did. At 4:15, she stood in the center of the room and clapped her hands. "Everyone, I just want to say a few words. I thought she would maybe, just maybe, thank me." Instead, she pointed to the store-bought cake she'd placed on the sideboard. "This year we're starting a new tradition," she said. "A party to celebrate the new chapter of our family. Young voices, fresh energy." People clapped politely. I stood there, frozen, holding the knife I was about to use to cut my cake. Vanessa smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. "And since the older generation has passed the torch, we want to give space to the next generation. So today, we honor our future." I looked around. Some people looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke. Daniel just sipped his drink. Then Vanessa turned to me. "Evelyn, maybe you can rest a bit. Take the evening off. Let the younger folks handle things." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a dismissal. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. I looked at Daniel. He didn't say a word. He didn't even meet my eyes. "I think I'll just step outside," I said, barely above a whisper. No one stopped me. I went to the kitchen, grabbed my coat, and walked to the back porch. I sat alone, listening to them laugh inside, and I felt a pain in my chest I hadn't felt since my husband passed. They were celebrating. Without me, in my house, on my birthday. I stayed there for a while, watching the wind move the trees. When I came back in, they had already cut the cake. Not mine, hers, and no one noticed I'd been gone. When they finally left around 8 p.m., Vanessa hugged me stiffly. "Thanks for hosting," she said, as if I were a hotel receptionist. Daniel kissed my cheek again. "Talk soon, Mom." I closed the door and locked it. Then I went into the kitchen, cut myself a slice of my chocolate cake, and ate it in silence at the table I had decorated for my birthday. I didn't cry, not then, but something inside me shifted. That night, I sat in my bedroom and stared at the photo of my husband on the nightstand. "I think they've forgotten I exist," I whispered. The next morning, I found the decorations still hanging in the living room. The half-finished lasagna was untouched in the fridge. The trash can was full of paper plates and plastic cups, none of them from my set. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee and tried to make sense of what had happened. I didn't know what hurt more, being ignored or realizing I had expected anything different. Daniel didn't call. Vanessa didn't text. The girls didn't even send a message. Around noon, I opened the hallway closet where I kept the fireproof safe. I pulled out the folder labeled Estate and spread the documents across the table. It was all still as I had last left it. My will, my life insurance, the house deed, everything I had left to Daniel. I stared at the line with his name on it and felt something twist in my stomach. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. My hand trembled as I folded the document and put it back in the folder. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. But something had changed, and I knew this much. I was never going to sit in silence again. The Monday after the birthday, I got up at 6, like always. My joints ached as I moved, but I ignored it. I made my bed, straightened the cushions on the sofa, and swept the porch. Routine helped. It kept my hands busy while my mind tried to untangle what had happened. The house was quiet, too quiet. No phone calls, no missed messages, not even a lazy, "Thanks for the party," from Daniel. By the third day, I knew they weren't going to acknowledge anything. They had moved on, and I was no longer needed. Around 11 a.m., I got a call from Helen. She was the only person I still considered a true friend. We met 20 years ago through church. Her voice was familiar, steady. "Hey, Evelyn, how did the big day go?" I hesitated. It happened. There was a pause. That bad? I didn't know how to answer. I gave her the outline, how they pushed me aside, how they cut my cake without me, how they turned my birthday into some twisted celebration of their new chapter. Helen didn't interrupt. When I finished, she let out a breath. "Evelyn, that's not a mistake. That's a decision. They don't respect you anymore. I think they've stopped seeing me as a person," I said quietly. "I think I'm just the woman who holds the keys to the house now." Helen didn't argue. Instead, she said, "You ever think about changing the will?" I blinked. "What?" You heard me," I swallowed. "But Daniel's my only child." "And that means what exactly?" she asked. "That he gets to treat you like a piece of old furniture and still collect the house, the savings, and whatever's left behind?" I didn't respond, but her words stuck. That afternoon, I sat back down with the folder from the safe. I stared at the will again, the signature I'd placed years ago, back when I believed Daniel and Vanessa would always take care of me, back when I thought Vanessa was just nervous around me, not hostile. I remembered when Daniel and Vanessa were struggling. He'd been laid off. Vanessa was pregnant with Haley. They were going to lose their rental. I offered the guest house on my property. They moved in the next month, rent-free. I paid for the renovations myself. Vanessa didn't thank me. Not once. But I told myself they were just overwhelmed. Now I saw it differently. They hadn't grown past that period. They had grown used to it. 2 days later, Daniel called. "Hey, Mom, how are you?" His voice was cheerful. Too cheerful. "I'm fine," I said. "Did you enjoy the party?" He paused. "Oh, yeah. It turned out nice, didn't it?" "Did it?" He ignored the question. "Hey, listen. Vanessa and I were talking. You know how we've been thinking about remodeling the guest house?" I stayed silent. "Well, we'd like to maybe expand a bit. Knock down one of the dividing walls, extend the kitchen. Vanessa's mom is visiting more often, and space is getting tight." I waited. Then came the real reason, so I thought. We'd go ahead and get the paperwork started. To put the title in our name officially. Make things easier, just in case anything ever happens to you. It's more of a formality. There it was. Just in case anything ever happens to me. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply said, "I'm not dead yet, Daniel." He laughed awkwardly. "Mom, I didn't mean it like that." "I don't recall ever signing over the property," I added. "Well, you always said it would go to us anyway. It's practically ours already." "I never said that." He didn't speak. "I need to go," I said. "We'll talk another time." After I hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. His words played over and over in my mind. "It's practically ours already." I stood up, took the folder, and put it in my bag. Then I called Helen. I'm going to rewrite the will, I told her. Good, she said. You want me to go with you? I hesitated, then nodded. Yes. We scheduled an appointment with Margaret Ellis, a local attorney known for estate planning. She had helped several women in our senior group after similar situations, cases where children assumed ownership before it was given. When we walked into her office, Margaret greeted me with a firm handshake. Tell me what happened, she said. I told her everything. She didn't react. She simply nodded, took notes, and asked questions when necessary. Do you want to revoke the existing will? Yes. Do you want to leave anything to your son? I paused. I'll think about it, I said. But the house, the savings, my pension, all of it, I want it protected. I want it in the hands of people who won't treat me like a burden. She nodded. We can create a trust. You can name someone you trust as the beneficiary, or a charity. What if I change my mind later? Then you change it again. By the end of the meeting, I had signed the revocation forms. We scheduled the official signing of the new will for the following week. When I got home, I went straight to my room and opened my closet. I pulled down the box labeled keepsakes. Inside were photos, letters, school drawings from Daniel. I pulled out a crayon drawing of our family, Daniel as a little boy with his arms around me and his father. Mommy, Daddy, me. I stared at it for a long time, and then I put it back in the box, closed the lid, and returned it to the closet. 3 days later, Vanessa showed up at my house unannounced. She didn't smile. We need to talk, she said, stepping inside without asking. I was in the middle of something, I replied. She ignored that. Daniel told me about your reaction, about the house title. I said nothing. She crossed her arms. I don't understand why you're being so difficult. We've lived here for years. We've kept you company. The girls... You kept me company? I interrupted. She faltered. Well, we've included you. I almost laughed. Included me? You kicked me out of my own birthday. Her face turned red. That was a misunderstanding? No, it was very clear. She took a deep breath. Look, you're old. That's not an insult. It's just the truth. And we need to think long term. If something happens to you, I already told Daniel, I'm not dead. She stepped closer. You're being ungrateful. We've put up with a lot. I looked at her straight. Vanessa, this isn't your house. She blinked. It will be. I met her gaze. Not anymore. For the first time in years, she didn't have a response. She stood there, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. Then she turned and stormed out. I closed the door behind her and locked it. And for the first time, in a long time, I felt in control. The day after Vanessa barged into my house, I expected Daniel to call. I expected some attempt at smoothing things over, or at least a half-hearted excuse. Maybe something like, she didn't mean it, or she was just upset. But nothing came. No text. No knock on the door. No apology. 2 days passed. Then, late Thursday afternoon, I saw Daniel's car pull into the driveway. He sat inside for a full minute before getting out. His face looked tense. Not angry, not sad, just tight like he was holding something back. I met him at the door before he could knock. Hi, Mom, he said. I didn't respond right away. I stepped aside and let him in. He stood in the foyer, looking around like the house suddenly felt unfamiliar. Vanessa said you two had a disagreement. I sat down in the armchair and motioned for him to sit. He took the couch, resting his hands on his knees. She walked into my home, I said, and told me I was old, difficult, and that this place will be hers. He exhaled. Mom, she didn't mean it like that. She's just stressed. I kept my voice even. No, Daniel, she meant every word. He looked down. I don't understand what's going on, he said finally. Why are you changing things all of a sudden? I'm not changing anything, Daniel. I'm correcting a mistake. His brows furrowed. What mistake? I leaned forward slightly. The mistake of assuming I owed you everything I worked for. The mistake of rewarding disrespect with inheritance. He blinked, like I had slapped him. You're saying I've disrespected you? You let your wife humiliate me on my birthday, I replied. You said nothing. You did nothing. You watched it happen. That wasn't... He stopped. Then softer. That wasn't the intention. I nodded slowly. But it was the result. Silence fell between us. Then he asked the question he'd come for. Are you changing the will? I didn't answer immediately. I looked at him. My son. The same boy who used to fall asleep on my chest as a baby. The same boy who used to cry when I left him at preschool. And now he was sitting across from me, more worried about losing the house than he ever seemed to be about losing me. Yes, I said plainly. His face flushed. Mom, come on. After everything, I'm your only child. I know. You're seriously going to take everything away from me? No. I'm taking back what I worked for. You were never entitled to it. He stood up, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. This is Vanessa, isn't it? She got under your skin and now you're punishing both of us. I didn't move. You stood by and let her treat me like a stranger in my own home, I said. And now you're here because you're scared of what you'll lose, not because of me. That's not true. Then why didn't you call? After the party, he didn't have an answer. I stood and walked to the door. I think that's enough for today, I said. He hesitated, then finally walked past me and stepped outside. At the last second, he turned around. I hope you know what you're doing, he said. I nodded. I do. He drove off. That night, I lay awake for hours, not because I felt uncertain. I didn't, but because I finally saw things clearly for what they were. It hurt, yes, but clarity always comes with a sting. The next morning, Helen picked me up and we drove back to Margaret Ellis's office. It was time to sign the new will. Margaret had prepared everything. The documents were in order, the signatures and witnesses ready. She read everything aloud, slowly, as I nodded through the sections. The house would be placed in a living trust, protected and inaccessible to Daniel or anyone else. My savings would go to a women's shelter I had supported for years, and a portion of my pension would be left to Lily, my younger granddaughter, who still hugged me when she saw me, who still drew me cards on Mother's Day. I signed my name on the final page. It was done. Afterward, Helen and I went to a diner nearby. For lunch, we sat in a booth by the window sipping coffee, watching the street traffic roll by. You know he'll come back, she said. I know, and he won't be calm. I'm not expecting calm anymore. Helen looked at me for a long moment. You're different. I raised an eyebrow. How so? You're not scared of him. I was never scared of him, I said. I was scared of losing him. Now I realize. He left a long time ago. That weekend passed quietly. I cooked, cleaned, and spent an entire Sunday afternoon trimming the hedges in the backyard. The physical labor felt good. It made me feel present. On Monday morning, the doorbell rang at 8:15. I opened it to find Vanessa standing there, arms crossed, holding a manila envelope. I want to talk, she said. I'm busy, I replied. I'll be quick. I let her in, reluctantly. She walked straight to the kitchen and placed the envelope on the table. We're drawing up a proposal, she said. Daniel and I are offering to buy the house from you outright. I stared at her. We've looked at the market. We'll make you a fair offer. You can move somewhere smaller, more manageable. It's time. I sat down across from her. You want me to sell you the house? Yes. You want me to give up my home so you can claim it early. We're trying to be practical, she said. And what happens to me after I leave? You'll have cash, she said quickly. And less responsibility. I pushed the envelope back toward her. No. Her face twisted. You're going. To regret this. I stood. I don't think I will. Vanessa scoffed and grabbed the envelope. You're being spiteful. I opened the front door. And you're being entitled. She walked out without another word. As I closed the door, I leaned my back against it and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. I was just done. That afternoon, I called Lily's school and left a message with the principal. I asked if they could set aside time for me to meet with Lily's counselor. I wanted to open an education fund for her. Something separate, something quiet, just for her. She was only 11, but she already carried herself like someone who noticed, things most adults missed. 3 days later, I received a letter in the mail from Daniel. It was short, typed, cold. Since you've chosen to treat us like strangers, please don't be surprised if that's how we treat you from now on. We have our own family to protect. He signed it Daniel and Vanessa. No love, no mom, just that. I read it twice. Then I folded it and placed it in the back of the safe, behind the old will. The one that no longer meant anything. They thought I would feel guilty. They thought I would beg. But instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. It was 2 weeks after Daniel's letter arrived when I saw them again. Saturday morning. The sky was gray, the kind of overcast that always made the air feel heavier. I had just finished sweeping the back porch and was coming around the side of the house when I saw Vanessa's SUV pull into the driveway. She wasn't alone. Daniel stepped out of the passenger seat, wearing jeans and a polo shirt. His smile was strange, too rehearsed, too quick. Vanessa stepped out from the driver's side with a bouquet of grocery store flowers, the kind they bundled together last minute near the checkout line. I stood by the garden hose and waited. No need to pretend surprise. "Hi, Mom," Daniel said as they walked up. I gave a short nod. "Morning." Vanessa extended the flowers like a peace offering. "We thought we'd stop by. Just check in. No pressure." I took the flowers, thanked her, and gestured toward the porch. They sat across from me at the small metal table. Daniel tapped his fingers nervously. Vanessa looked around like she was making mental notes again, maybe imagining what curtains she'd hang when this place was finally hers. "We've been thinking," Daniel started, "about everything. We probably came on too strong." "We did," Vanessa cut in. "We were out of line. Especially me." I tilted my head. I wasn't sure what they wanted yet, but I knew this wasn't just guilt. This was planned. "I appreciate you saying that," I said. Vanessa reached into her purse and pulled out a card. A real one. It had gold foil edges and a picture of a sunset. She placed it in front of me. "We wanted to invite you to dinner, just the family, tomorrow night. Lily's been asking about you." I looked down at the card. I could tell it was a strategy. But I also missed Lily. I nodded slowly. "All right, I'll come." Daniel looked surprised. Maybe he thought I'd refuse outright. Maybe he thought I'd throw the card back at them. But I had learned something recently. Sometimes the best way to see someone's real motives is to give them space to reveal them. The next evening, I dressed in a simple navy sweater and slacks. I didn't bring wine. I didn't bring dessert. I just brought myself. It felt like the most honest thing I could do. Their house was spotless when I arrived. Too spotless. Haley and Lily sat at the dining table, already dressed for dinner. Vanessa served lasagna, frozen, I could tell, but plated nicely. Daniel poured drinks. The mood was suspiciously calm. "We're glad you're here," Daniel said. "We missed you," Vanessa added. Lily smiled. "Grandma, I made something for you." She handed me a folded piece of paper. Inside was a drawing, her, me, and a tree in the backyard. It said, "I love Grandma Evelyn," in her careful handwriting. My chest tightened a bit. I hugged her. We sat for dinner. Conversation was light. Vanessa asked about my garden. Daniel told a story about something that happened at work. Haley barely looked up from her phone, but I didn't mind. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. As Vanessa cleared the plates, Daniel cleared his throat. "By the way, Mom, We've been talking to a financial advisor about long-term care, planning ahead. I looked at him. Here it comes. And, well, he said it would make sense to update property documents now, just so we're not scrambling in the future. You know, to make things easier on everyone. I didn't react. Vanessa returned with dessert, store-bought cheesecake. She smiled. We know you're still independent, of course. This is just preparation. I set my fork down. So this dinner was to make another request. Daniel raised his hands. No, this was just dinner. But also, yes? He didn't answer. I nodded. Well, thank you for the meal. Lily, thank you for the drawing. It meant a lot. I stood up. Vanessa blinked. You're leaving? Yes. It's clear why I was invited. Daniel followed me to the door. Mom, please, just listen. I opened the door. I did. I walked to my car and didn't look back. I drove home slowly, not out of sadness, but with a calm clarity. The dinner wasn't reconciliation. It was manipulation with nicer silverware. The next morning, I received a text from Vanessa. We tried. You've made your choice. Don't expect us to keep trying if you don't meet us halfway. No mention of Lily. No mention of the drawing. Just another push, another attempt to control the narrative. I didn't reply. Instead, I pulled out the file Margaret had given me and reviewed the documents again. Everything was in place. The trust, the educational fund for Lily, the medical directives. It was all secure. That same week, I had my locks changed. I called a local company and had the work done within an hour. New keys, no spares left behind. Later that day, I went through my kitchen drawers and found the emergency key Daniel had once insisted I keep, just in case. I drove to the lake and tossed it into the water. I didn't tell anyone. A few days passed. I started waking up without checking my phone first. No anxiety about a new message. No rehearsing explanations in my head. That Friday, I ran into Haley and Lily at the grocery store. Haley kept walking. Lily ran up and hugged me tightly. I miss you, she said. I miss you too. She looked up. Why don't you come over anymore? I crouched beside her. Sometimes adults have to take space from each other, but it doesn't mean I don't love you. She nodded. I gave her a kiss on the forehead. As I stood, I saw Vanessa at the other end of the aisle, watching. Her mouth was tight. Her hands gripped the shopping cart. I didn't wave. Neither did she. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of tea and looked out the window. The backyard was quiet. The wind moved gently through the trees. The house felt peaceful again. I had stopped asking them to treat me better. Now I was just making sure they no longer had the power to treat me at all. It had been nearly a month since that staged dinner. No calls, no messages, no sudden visits. At first, I wondered if they had finally given up, but I knew Vanessa well enough to know that silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. She was the type to let things simmer until she found a new angle. And Daniel? He followed whatever direction she pointed him in. Always had. Still, part of me hoped the quiet meant peace. Then, early one Tuesday morning, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it ring. They didn't leave a message. 5 minutes later, it rang again. Same number. I picked up. Hi, Evelyn. This is Carol. I'm your neighbor down on East Magnolia. I didn't recognize the name. I'm calling because, well, I saw something odd yesterday. A man parked a black SUV in front of your house and started walking around your backyard. I thought maybe it was a contractor or something, but it didn't look right. He left after a few minutes, but I figured you should know. I paused. What did he look like? White guy, mid-30s, gray jacket, sunglasses. He didn't ring your doorbell, just circled around and then left. I thanked her and hung up. The SUV matched Daniel's. That afternoon, I checked the side gate. It was still latched, but the padlock had been tampered with, scratches along the edge, like someone tried to open it. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't confront him. Instead, I bought a new lock, a stronger one, and added a security camera above the porch. The next few days, nothing happened. No cars, no strange noises, no footsteps at night. Then on Saturday morning, I received a package. It was small, unmarked, and had no return address. Inside, I found a single sheet of paper, typed, no greeting, no name. You're pushing us away. We didn't want this. If you don't reverse things, don't expect us to include you in future family decisions. This is your last chance. There was no signature, no direct threat, just an underhanded message dressed up as concern. I placed the letter on the kitchen counter, stared at it, and then ran it through the shredder. Later that night, I sat at the dining table with my old journals. I hadn't written in years, but something about that letter stirred something in me. I opened a fresh notebook and began writing. Not poetry, not nostalgia, just facts, dates, conversations, money I had spent, events they had ruined, times they had left me out, dismissed me, used me. I filled 10 pages that night. By the end, I realized something. I had spent so much of my life trying to preserve a family that never tried to preserve me. 2 days later, Daniel called. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short. Mom, we need to talk. This has gone too far. I didn't call back. That evening, as I watered the garden, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned and saw Daniel walking down the path. No warning, no invitation. He had let himself in through the side gate. You're trespassing, I said calmly. He raised his hands. I just want to talk. Then use the phone like an adult. He ignored that. We found out about the trust, the shelter, the girl, Lily. I said nothing. Do you realize what you've done? You're destroying this family. No, I said. I'm just making sure the parts of it that matter are protected. His voice rose. We're your family. You were, I replied. Until you started treating me like a burden. I never. You did, I cut in. You let Vanessa humiliate me. You came into my home and demanded things that weren't yours. You treated my life's work like your backup plan. He stepped back, shaking his head. We were just trying to prepare for the future. Then prepare without me. He looked stunned, like the idea of me not being there, me not being an option, had never occurred to him. You'll regret this, he said quietly. One day you'll be alone and you'll regret pushing us away. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, I've already been alone. You just didn't notice. He turned and walked out. That night I wrote a letter to Lily. Not a will or a legal document, just a letter. I told her that I loved her, that I saw how kind she was, how thoughtful. I told her that nothing that was happening was her fault, that families are complicated, but kindness is simple. And that I hoped, no matter what anyone told her, that she'd never stop asking questions or drawing pictures of trees and sunlight. I sealed it in an envelope and placed it in the folder marked Private, right beside the trust documents. The following week I saw a social media post from Vanessa. She was in Florida, poolside, holding a drink, smiling. The caption read, taking a break from toxic energy. Sometimes self-care means cutting out negativity, even when it's family. I didn't feel angry. I felt confirmation. That weekend, Helen came over and helped me clean out the storage room. We pulled old boxes, sorted photos, donated things I hadn't touched in decades. As we took a break in the kitchen, she looked at me and said, They thought you'd beg for a seat at their table. I nodded, but I built my own instead. We clinked our glasses. Outside, the garden was blooming again. Inside, the air felt clean, and for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt earned. I didn't tell anyone. When I got the diagnosis, the doctor had been gentle, careful with his words, but I appreciated directness more than sympathy. Stage 2. Manageable, he said, but we'd need to act fast. A series of treatments, likely some discomfort, but no promises. I nodded, took the pamphlets he offered, and walked out of the office with a quiet sense of resolve. No panic, no tears. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't call Vanessa, and not because of pride, but because I already knew what would happen. There would be noise, performances, appearances at appointments that weren't about me, but about the idea of being seen doing the right thing. I couldn't go through that again. Instead, I focused on setting everything in place, quietly. I updated the trust once more. I included the medical directives, double-checked the successor trustee details. Lily's educational fund was finalized, and I made sure her name was protected from Vanessa and Daniel legally. I met with Margaret for the last time and handed her a sealed letter with instructions on when to deliver it. She looked at me and said, "You've thought of everything." "I've had time," I told her. The treatment started. I told Helen, and she came with me to every appointment. She waited in the lobby with a crossword book and always brought ginger tea for afterward. Some days were harder than others. Some nights I couldn't sleep, but I never felt sorry for myself. I felt tired, just tired. One afternoon, maybe two. Weeks into the treatments, I received a card. No return address. Inside was a handwritten message from Lily. "Grandma Evelyn, I miss you. I don't know why we don't see you anymore, but I hope you're okay. I made a picture of your garden. I remember how you showed me the names of the flowers. Love, Lily." The paper was folded into quarters and covered with colored pencil drawings. Tulips, daisies, her favorite, lavender. I held the card against my chest and let myself cry, just for a moment. Not because I felt weak, but because I finally allowed myself to feel what I had held in for too long. The letter went into the folder marked private. A week later, I fell. It wasn't dramatic. I was coming down the stairs and missed a step. I didn't break anything, but I bruised my ribs and hit my shoulder hard. Helen insisted I stay at her place while I recovered, and I agreed. We packed a small bag, and she helped me into the guest room that used to belong to her daughter. The bed was soft. The house smelled like peppermint and bread. 2 days after the fall, Daniel showed up at my house. Helen had gone back to pick up my mail and found him trying to open the side gate again. This time, he was yelling. Something about how I was turning. Lily against him. How Vanessa was done trying. How they had been more than patient. Helen didn't let him in. She handed him the letter I had written for him, sealed and waiting. She told him I was safe, and that I didn't owe him anything. Inside that letter, I had written the truth. "Daniel, you were a sweet boy, and I loved you deeply. But somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing me as your mother and started seeing me as an obstacle. I don't owe you an explanation for reclaiming my life. I gave you years. I gave you comfort, shelter, help. You gave me silence, disrespect, and absence. The house isn't yours. It never was. The inheritance you counted on is no longer waiting. I left everything to someone who saw me, not because she asked, but because she loved me without trying to take from me. You're free now, free from the burden of pretending to care, and I'm free too." He never responded. 3 weeks later, I went back to my house for one night, just to sit in my own kitchen. Again, I walked through the living room, touched the back of the sofa, flipped through one of Lily's old drawings still tucked inside a drawer. I didn't feel angry. I felt finished. The next morning, I called Helen and asked her to come pick me up. I left the house as it was. Nothing packed, nothing taken. Everything already had its place. It was a Thursday when I passed. Peaceful. No machines, no confusion. Just quiet. The letter to Lily was delivered 2 weeks later. My sweet girl, I hope. You never believe people who say you can't ask questions or draw outside the lines. You're the best part of everything I leave behind. The garden is yours now. Keep it blooming. And know that even when people try to rewrite stories, the truth always has roots. Love, Grandma Evelyn. The reading of the will took place at Margaret's office. Daniel and Vanessa were present, seated stiffly, dressed in black. Margaret kept her voice neutral. They received nothing. The house was placed in a protected trust for Lily, inaccessible to her parents until she turned 25. The remaining savings were donated to the women's shelter under a program now renamed Evelyn's Place. Daniel was furious. Vanessa cried, not out of grief, but disbelief. After everything we did? She asked. Margaret replied. She made her decisions clear. They left without saying another word. Lily stood outside the office holding Helen's hand. She didn't understand the paperwork, but she understood the drawing she had made weeks ago, now framed and hung inside Margaret's office. She pointed to it and said, "That's Grandma's garden." Helen smiled and said, "Yes, and it's still yours."